Thorpe's translation of Simon's Edda, the Younger Edda in translations, Anderson's Norse Mythology, Gerber's Myths of Northern Lands, William and Mary Howitt's Literature and Romance of Northern Europe, and Mallett's Northern Antiquities. Brookline, Massachusetts, September 1901. The people who lived long ago, in the far-off lands of the north, watched the wonderful things that happened out of doors every day, just as we do. But they did not know about the one loving God, who is the Father of all, who made them and the world, and rules it by his wise laws. So they thought there must be a great many unseen powers living in the clouds, in the wind, in the storms and the sunshine, and doing all those wonders that no man could do. And so those northern people, who were our own forefathers, came to believe in many gods, one for the sun, another for the thunder, another for the flowers, and so on. In the long dark winters, when the bright sun had gone away from them, these Northmen had time to think many thoughts about the powers of frost and wind and storms, which they called giants, and they used to tell stories and sing songs about the short, bright summer, the thawing out of the streams and lakes, the coming of the birds and flowers. With great joy the people saw the bright sun-god Baldur come back to them in the spring, after the long darkness, and knew that they owed their lives to his friendly warmth and light. As we read the stories or myths told by those people long ago, we can see that they were meant to tell about the world around us. At first the stories were told and sung from father to son, that is, from one generation to another. But later, when people learned how to write, these myths were written down and kept with great love and care. This is the story they told of the beginning. At first, before living creatures were in the world, it was all rough and without order. Far to the north it was very cold, for ice and snow were everywhere. Toward the south there was fire, and from the meeting of the fire and the cold a thick vapor was formed, from which sprang a huge giant. On looking about for some food, he saw a cow who was also searching for something to eat. The ice tasted salt, and when the cow began to lick it, a head appeared, and at last the whole figure of a god stood before her. For these two, the giant and the god, came the two great races of giants and gods who were always enemies to each other. The giants were constantly trying to break into Asgard, the home of the gods, in the sky. The gods, on the other hand, watched and planned to keep out the giants, and to drive them back to their own stronghold, Utgard. Our world, where men and women lived, was between Utgard and Asgard. It was called Midgard, and around this Midgard world under the ocean was coiled a monstrous serpent, who grew so long that his tail grew down his throat. He was called the Midgard Serpent. A wonderful tree named Yggdrasil connected all the worlds. This great ash tree had its roots in Utgard, and the tops of its branches reached up so high as to overshadow Asgard. Its three main roots were watered by three fountains, and near one of them sat the wise giant Mimir, of whom we shall hear later. The Norns, three sisters, also lived at the roots of Yggdrasil, and were careful to see that it was watered every day. A little grey squirrel was always running up and down the tree, jerking his tail and hurrying to tell the news to everyone along the way. He was so anxious to be the first one to carry the news that many times he brought trouble to himself and to others, because he was not always careful to tell a story just as he had heard it, and often everyone would have been happier if the squirrel had kept the story quite to himself. The gods and goddesses all together